The kindest thing that we can do is set super high expectations for people.
CEO of Rupa.
Infrastructure supports chronic illness, that supports lifestyle medicine. I had this strong conviction that there was about to be a whole new market in healthcare and wellness.
How do you set high expectations for the people that you're leading?
We believe we are nice when we are soft on people and let them do less than what they're capable of, but we're not kind. It's this concept of we take our work very seriously, but we don't take ourselves seriously.
Building together, doing hard things together, accomplishing things together, it's fun.
I think you can create magical moments in every moment. Follow great people. Don't overthink it. Listen to your gut. Ask for money, get advice. Ask for advice, get money twice.
Tara, it's awesome to have you here on the Learning Leader Show. Welcome.
Thanks for having me.
So I am curious about your upbringing because when I looked at you and your brother, two valedictorians who have gone on to become exceptional leaders, and your career, you're still very early in your career. So as a dad myself, I'm just curious, what did your parents do to raise gritty, thoughtful, intelligent, hardworking kids?
I've actually thought about this more and more because people ask me this more and more as both of our companies have gotten more in the public eye. And it's funny because I never thought that we were anything special growing up. But now thinking back to kind of where we started and where we are growing up in small town, West Texas, most of the people that we grew up with are in very different places than we are. And I've been thinking about like, what was it for my parents? And I actually think it's a little bit like running a company and building a company culture in that the company culture can't be anything other than what I model. And so in a sense, like, I think that my brother and I can't be much more than what our parents are modeling, and not necessarily what they're saying, but what they're doing. And they are two kind of very gritty, workaholic, maybe for lack of a better term, even though that has a negative connotation, they take it as a positive. They're just super, super passionate about business and building and doing something with their lives and exploring and being curious and not having fear. And they're both very different, which we can get into, but so much of it was just what they modeled.
What are some examples of like dinner table conversations that they talked about with each other as well as with you guys?
I mean, my dad, both my parents, like, they're so different. They grew up in India. They knew each other for 15 minutes and then decided to get an arranged marriage. And a month later had a
15
wedding.
15 minutes? For real?
15 minutes. Yeah, for real. That's it.
Did their parents arrange it for them?
The families arranged it. They got to say yes or no. And so my dad, I think the question, or my dad came to my mom and said, hey, I don't have a ton of money right now, but I am absolutely confident that I will in the future and we'll be able to figure this out together. And I'm confident in me. And that's what sold my mom.
His confidence.
Yeah.
His belief.
His confidence and saying, I will work hard and I will never let us down.
Wow.
And so it's a bit of that. And so you asked, like, what were dinner table conversations?
Yeah.
They were always about, Bill Gates and Warren Buffett and the stock market and things like that. And it was always this like obsession with these business leaders and what they were doing.
Wow. So were you into that as a kid? Because I feel like my kids would not be into that, but I don't know. Maybe that's a fault of mine. I'm not sure.
So by the way, I think that the dinner table conversation changed as we got older. When I was younger, my parents were really just trying to figure it out. My dad always wanted to be an entrepreneur, but his mom told him to be a doctor. And as he says, you listen to what your mom says. So he became a doctor. That's how they immigrated to America. My mom was the one who wanted to immigrate to America. And then my dad ran the pediatric ICU for our entire like West Texas, New Mexico, Kansas population. He was a single doctor if you were under the age of 18 for over 20 years. It was nuts. He never took a vacation, 24/7. I still remember his beeper number because that's what I would have to call before cell phones. And he started in that. And then there's basically, when my mom, there's a funny story that I'll tell you because There's a lot of context to it, but my mom was also like this brilliant tax accountant, and she was moving up the chain in one of the big four accounting firms. And when she had my brother, she kept going with it. And then when she had me, she stopped working. And so for the first 2 years of my life, I knew her as a stay-at-home mom. And I loved that. She was always around. It was great. And so she asked me one day when I was about 4 years old, and she said, Tara, what do you want to be when you grow up? And I looked at her just super excited. And I said, nothing, just like you.
Ooh.
And I mean, that was a moment for her. And so she went back to college, and in our hometown, she went to Texas Tech University, got a master's in kind of like what was happening in IT and computers at that point, started teaching classes at the mall, at the local mall on PowerPoint. She just wanted to learn. She just wanted to start a business. And then she built that into this business that is now our family business, but I grew up with it. This is when I was in third grade. My mom went back to school. So she started the business when I was in fifth grade. And then it really only took off after I graduated high school. But my dad was able to quit his medical practice, and now they work together on this business.
Whoa, what's that business?
It's called Starnick. It's a utility billing company. So our conversations like really didn't exist at the dinner table because my parents were super busy growing up. But then in high school and afterwards, they have now kind of shifted entirely to business. And so it's funny. I don't think our parents actually didn't want us to start companies. They wanted us to be doctors or lawyers or have some security and just kind of take it a little bit easier than them. But my brother and me are a little crazy. My brother and I.
I love it. What about presence, meaning like being there? Because if you work 24/7, you have a pager, and that's how you know
Yeah.
the person that you love, like your dad. And I do want to talk about his confidence in a second, because I know you've tweeted about that too. So I'm curious, because I want us all to be able to have the confidence like your dad. But when you're like that, almost married to your job, then that in a way it could say like, oh, you're prioritizing work over being a husband or a
Yeah.
dad. How did you view it?
I never noticed. And it was just interesting. Like my dad would drop off, hot fudge sundaes from Sonic drive-in for lunch at me in middle school. And I still have this memory of that. And
Uh,
so they were always there. Probably actually my parents were like there to an annoying amount when I was growing up, where I kind of just wanted some more freedom, and they were always there. But they
huh.
built this life where and I think I've learned this as I've gotten older, they worked so well as a couple, even though they only knew each other 15 minutes, because their values were completely in alignment. So their number one value is family. They would
Mhm.
never drop, I mean, they would never put business in front to family. Family always comes first. To this day, if I call my mom, it doesn't matter what my parents are doing. If I call them, they will answer or call me right back. They'll step out of any meeting. And then I think in knowing that, I think gave me this confidence that they showed me that I was more important.
Uh,
Even if they were spending a ton of time at work, I always had the power to interrupt if I needed them. And so there's that. And then, but here's the thing is I think a lot of people who have family number one. And if you're listening to this, you won't be able to see my hand movements, but putting my hand, up in the air on like a high level. And then work ends up being significantly lower than that. And I think what's unique about my parents is that family is always number one, but work is right below that.
mm.
And it's always like they're very driven, but at the end of the day, when push comes to shove, which one comes first? That was always clear to me.
I sense a lot of confidence in you as well. Again, I hinted at that you tweeted about your dad's confidence levels and that we all want that. How do you think somebody develops confidence?
Yeah. So I think that confidence isn't a singular thing. So first off, like we can be very confident in certain areas of our life, and then we can be less confident in others. And I think that that's a big thing where there's no such thing as a confident person. You can have confidence in certain abilities of yours. And I think that's something to remember. And I also think it's absolutely developed over
Hmm.
time. Many of us, like those of us who are lucky enough, get confidence because we are loved from the beginning. I think there's a certain confidence that comes with safety, security, and love. And that's probably the most important type of confidence that parents can give their children. But there's other types of confidence too, right? How do you get the confidence to just cold call anybody and sell them your product? Like that's a totally different type of confidence. And so my belief that confidence is just keeping promises to yourself
Mm.
in a way that when you need to show up, you know that you will. So, for example, if I set a goal at this point I know that I'm going to hit it because I've proven to myself in that arena that I have committed onto every little micro decision. So, for example, if I say I'm going to run a marathon, for example, I know that if I say that, I will hit it because in the day to day, I say, hey, I'm going to go to bed early so I can work out in the morning. And I do that. Now, if I set this goal and I tried to build these habits and I didn't follow through on my habits, I would have zero evidence in my gut and my brain that I was actually going to follow through on the bigger picture goal. So I think confidence is really built in those small moments. But again, like it's small moments that tailor to the bigger thing that you're trying to have confidence in, right? So
Hmm.
if I am doing the tiny things every single day for my health, I might still not have confidence in a business sense. So it's about how can you break down the bigger thing that you're trying to achieve into small things and then prove to yourself every single day that you're going to commit to the small things.
And I love that confidence, I think, needs some evidence, but it can carry over, don't you think, where you've proven to yourself, you've kept promises to yourself in one area, maybe it's in running a marathon, something that's really hard, then that gives you confidence to do something else that's hard, even though if it has nothing to do with running a marathon, because your mind could say, I keep promises to myself. In the past, I've done hard things. And so that you can use some of that evidence to then transfer the confidence to do something else that's really hard.
Exactly. And I think this is one of the biggest lessons that I've learned. Compounding in in every sense of the word, whether it's financial or whether it's belief in yourself or whether it's your growth of your company, like compounding is the most powerful force in the universe, like one of the most powerful forces. And if you can use it to your advantage for something like building confidence and compounding and realizing that every single day what I do. Am I going to show up to this meeting on time? Do I believe I'm a good person? Do I believe I'm deserving of great things? Every single action that we take adds or subtracts to that confidence in ourselves.
Mm. Hmm. Okay, I was going to open this, but I was so curious about your parents. So, how I became aware of you, and there's a lot here that I think is great for leaders to learn. But I want to get into the actual story first, and then we'll expand. The story that went viral, I think online, millions of people have now read this, is about when you were at Stanford and you worked at Lululemon as kind of a side gig while in school, and you worked for an amazing leader while there. Can you take the story from there? What did you learn from that job, and how has that manager, that leader, helped you now that you're a CEO of a company?
Oh my goodness. I'm trying to think about how I condense this story. So first off, how did that tweet happen and how do all tweets happen? Literally that tweet happened because a friend was sitting in my kitchen on a Saturday and basically said, hey, you worked at Lululemon, right? Was that a good experience? And it just hit me. And I started explaining all of these things I learned. I was like, man, I should write this down because I've actually shared this story with a lot of people verbally. And that's actually how all my tweets happen, where it's just a thought I have or a story I'm sharing with somebody else. I'm like, I want to capture this and let me share it with people. And so I had no idea it was going to explode in the way that it did. But I think that it might have because it really resonates with people that
Yes.
you can have these experiences that on the outside might seem, oh, she just folded yoga pants at Lululemon as a part-time worker in a retail store, right? Like that's what it seems like from the outside. But I actually post that prominently. If you look at my Twitter bio, I say I worked at Lululemon. I think most people in my position after running this company and doing things that they wouldn't maybe put that front and center, but the experience that it gave me was so impactful that it's such a core piece of my story. So what it was like, I'd say I worked for a really great manager, a really great team, and a really great broader company. So the manager was the store manager, but I don't think that she would have been as impactful had it not been for the structural pieces of the organization that Lululemon corporate put on us as well, and the other people I was working with. And so I remember distinctly the interview process was actually more about Tara, what are your goals in life? Than it was about, hey, let me see how you can fold these yoga pants, or about my growth trajectory and my slope and how much I cared about personal development. that was the first signal that this was going to be a really, really interesting experience. And
That's
I'd
wild. They
always,
asked about that to be a part-time retail
yeah,
worker at Lululemon.
yes, yes.
Interesting. So they're filtering for growth-oriented, growth-focused people right from the start.
Yes, and
Okay.
obsessive people too. People who are obsessed with. So my manager before I started, she knew that I was excited about this stuff and really curious about selling. And this it's like funny to think about this now because this was in 2014, but she burned me a CD, which is funny. It's like, does anybody even know how to do that anymore? My car had a CD player in it. She burned me a copy of To Sell Is Human.
Yeah.
And this is before I even started.
Dan
And
Pink's the
I
man.
was just
Yeah,
listening.
yeah.
Yeah. And so I met her, and our onboarding was we sat in a park outside the store in Palo Alto, and we sat around and we talked about our goals. We talked about personal development, and we talked about why Lululemon was created. I still know the two muses who, we modeled everything off of, Ocean and Duke. I know their personalities. These are the personas that we built. Like, it was so much more about really showing up as the best version of myself than anything else. And that is the blueprint for which I've built Rupa. Because, the way I think about it is, put me as somebody, like, I am a highly motivated person, but if you put me in a company that doesn't value me, or I'm not working on something interesting, or I don't believe in what I'm doing, I'm not going to be a good employee. And so it's not about the person. It's about the raw materials of the person, but also like the environment that you put them into. And so I can hire the best of the best of the best people for Rupa, but they're not going to perform at 100% of their capabilities unless I get that out of them.
So how did the manager at Lululemon get it out of you?
So many things. So I think the first thing that really surprised me was this concept of everybody here, and I don't even know how much I was making. It was very little. It wasn't a lot. But everybody who worked at the store, part-time or full-time, got 10 workout classes a week comped. Again, there's 7 days in the week, and we got 10 classes in a week. And at this time, SoulCycle was exploding. And for somebody like me, who was a grad school student and who worked at retail part-time, and I was also TAing at Stanford as well at the same time, I was not making much money at all. And I'd taken a leave of absence for grad school. That's a whole nother story, but I was definitely not making a ton of money. So to have somebody pay $30 for my SoulCycle class, 10x a week, so $300, was the coolest perk in the world. But what it did was it created incredibly loyal employees. We bragged about that perk to everybody, so other people wanted to come work with us. It also allowed us to be in the core target demographics, meet the people in the neighborhood and in our location, and get really close to the fitness enthusiasts so that we could expand the brand. So everybody at SoulCycle, at the Pilates place, everybody at all these studios knew I worked at Lulu. Then they'd come in to buy their clothes, and I would greet them by name. And so it was this crazy, it makes so much sense from a business standpoint, where the value to the employee is so high, but the value to the business is tiny from a cost perspective, but the value that the creation is huge.
And you're probably wearing all their gear too.
Oh yeah, 40% discount for, I still remember it, a decade later, 40% discount for part-time employees and 60% off of anything on sale. And then 60% off for full-time employees and 80% off for anything on sale. And by the way, up until that point in time, I didn't own a single piece of Lululemon because I couldn't afford it.
Yeah. And what about having ownership over the P&L, sales goals? Like it sounded like you and your teammates were relentless when it came to exceeding your goals.
Yeah. I mean, if I remember correctly, that little store it's a tiny store in Palo Alto. We did like $35,000 a day in retail sales or something like that. And if you count how many pairs of pants that is, it's a lot on a sleepy, college university campus. It was something like that. But I remember every single day we had our numbers that we needed to hit. And I'd come in, if I had the morning shift, we'd sync up about it in the morning, we'd unbox everything, and then we'd get to work. But every single hour, I'd walk up to the cash register and be like, where are we? Where are we? And we'd all be whispering it through. And then when people would come up and when people would come in and buy, we'd have these mini high fives and celebrations. And I think it was this feeling of we know exactly what we're here to do. We know why we're doing it. We know exactly how far we're away from it. And giving us ownership over the numbers was just something truly, I never had a job like that before. So I didn't realize how special it was, but
How
it was really special.
how do you give or empower your team now that you're leading at Rupa to have ownership over the numbers, to celebrate together, to create that kind of camaraderie that you felt as part of that team? It's a bigger company now, right? Over 100 people, 110 people right now. It's not a small little store, right? It's a different kind of business, but you still
Yeah.
want to create some of that. How do you do that?
Yeah, like I think that there's always trade-offs when it comes to sharing information, right? Because
Hmm.
I think a lot of people are scared of what happens when my numbers get out. But I think there's there's a lot of things that we do differently that might not seem quote unquote efficient or maybe like protective, but I think it creates more good than bad. And I think sharing numbers is one of them. I'm very transparent with our team. Every single week, we go over revenue numbers in our all hands. We go over where we want to be, how far we are from that. We have goals that we want to hit, and we're tracking towards that. It's different because it's a remote environment. So we're not whispering it to each other, but we will post in our channel and talk about here's how far we are away from that. We talk about and I think it's important to like think about the numbers that people can actually move and the numbers that matter. So we can't necessarily move how many patients we serve, but that's a number that matters and is emotionally a very important number for our team, how many lives we've changed. And so we'll share that number whenever we hit big milestones. And I think it's really, really motivating for people. On top of that, every single person at the company has access to our dashboards and they can go look. And at the end of the day, nothing is secret anymore. Like people, for better or worse, they're going to share information. And so if I can either spend all my energy trying to lock down the information and like protect it and make sure that people don't share it and try to be secretive, or I can say, hey, here's where we are. We're proud of it. I'm not sharing this with the world, but I'm sharing it with you guys because I trust you and I believe that every single person here deserves to understand exactly where we are.
Can you take me back to the founding of the business? What is Rupa? Why are you so excited about it? How have you grown so fast to be where you are today?
Yeah. So this goes to before my time at Lululemon.
Hmm.
I had this strong conviction that there was about to be a whole new market in healthcare and wellness. And this was when I was in college in 2008, 2009, 2010. And what happened was I got really sick because I basically burnt myself out in undergrad. And my dad, who was the most amazing doctor at the time, he was running the pediatric ICU. So if I was the sickest I could be in under 18, I'd see my dad. I'd never been to a doctor in my life, right? Like I'd go see my dad. That was my worldview. And so in college, I ended up getting really sick. And my dad wasn't able to help me because I was dealing with a more chronic and lifestyle based issue where I was burnt out. My hormones were completely out of whack. I was depressed. Like I had so many issues, but it wasn't a bacterial infection. It wasn't like I was on life support. And that's the world in which my dad had been trained. And so I realized there is something here to human health. And I think I wrote down, and this is crazy to say now, over almost 15 years ago now, I wrote down my purpose in life is to improve the standard of living, what it means to be truly alive. That to me, that's the standard of living for every person on the planet. And at that time, I had no idea how to do that. But I knew that to do that, I needed to get out of the East Coast. I was in college in the East Coast. And so I went to Stanford, which was the most forward thinking place that I could, and respectable place where I could learn. And they had programs around lifestyle medicine, is what it was called. But anyway, it just started this journey of there is another way to access our health. And I think it at the point like I started getting introduced to the early integrative and functional medicine movements. And since then, it has absolutely exploded. Our instinct has turned out to be right. I think we see it with the longevity movement now and Huberman and Peter Attia, just all of this stuff. That's what we were after. And it was, how do we bring this to everybody? And so when I started Rupa, this was in 2018, the message on the functional medicine, root cause medicine, longevity medicine movement hadn't really exploded then. And I said, well, if I've been in startups for a little bit and I know that if everybody already knows about it, it's too late. And so you got to start early, and maybe we won't hit timing right, but maybe we will hit timing. We started early. No one really believed in the space, but luckily some people believed in me. They backed us. I scrapped together. It's like the classic story of no one believed in us, scrapped together angel checks, had to figure it out. It was terrible and lonely and all the things, but I believed in this future in this market. And I had no idea how it would turn out. And it turns out we were right. So our goal was, how do we build infrastructure so that every single healthcare provider can practice in a way that supports chronic illness, that supports lifestyle medicine. And the core piece of it was lab testing. So we're entering a new world in which there are so many more ways to understand what's going on inside our body. We don't have to guess and check anymore. And we can create customized, tailored solutions. And so there's all these new lab companies that are popping up. And all we did was we created a marketplace where doctors and practitioners can easily access lab testing and give it to their patients. And this is kind of like microbiome testing, advanced hormone testing, things like that. And it just exploded. So we've had 17 quarters of straight growth, like wow, never going down ever. And it's been insane. We've built a brand that consumers and practitioners are really proud of alone. And I think this is the big leap. You don't know if it's going to work, but it turns out we were on time.
Interesting. So as a consumer, I want to relate this to how I would benefit. I'm a 7-day-a-week workout guy, run, lift, all the stuff, play sports, swim, like do everything, a former college athlete and played after college football. And so I've always said since I stopped playing, like I want to be in better shape for as long as possible, as hopefully the rest of my life, than I was when I played. And I eat a lot better now and work out, I think, even better, maybe smarter now. And so I think this would be the other component to it. Instead of just going to the doctor when you're sick, but doing more preventative, more wellness type stuff. How does Rupa play a role for somebody like me who wants to continually, hopefully, get healthier as I age, as opposed to the opposite?
Yeah. First off, I love that. And I think that's what the world is waking up to, is we have so much more human potential, and we need to capture that. And so I love that. My answer is, I wish that we could support you right now. So what's happened is we actually work with doctors who are ordering for their patients and other healthcare providers. And it turns out when you are at the point of visiting a doctor or a healthcare provider, you're already pretty sick. So we're actually not yet in the preventative space. We are still focused on when you're actually sick, and you probably have friends who you've been to multiple doctors. Everybody tells you there's nothing going on. I can't figure it out. It's like my hormones feel out of whack, but your results are quote unquote normal. So what do you do? So people are turning to these functional medicine providers to get better insight into how to cure their, long-term chronic illnesses. And that's the population that we work with today. And I have big dreams of how do we expand this and create accessibility. And there's a whole new healthcare journey I think that we can go on as people that is not just reactive. But for now, Rupa is actually just for the people who kind of need it most.
Got you. Okay. So I want to talk about the build, because this starts with one person. So let's go to the beginning. You said scrapping together checks. I mean, I love sales. That was the first 12 years of my career, telephonic sales, then manager, then director, then VP. So I love how that works. And we're selling all the time, just like you did at Lululemon, just like you did to scrap those checks together. How did you do it? How did you convince people to back you, to support you, to give you money to start this company?
Oh my gosh, I have so many just wild and funny stories that are, very N of one and probably applicable to no one, but maybe entertaining. So I'll share a few.
Okay.
So I had no idea where to start. I mean, this is my first venture-backed company. Yes, I had been at Stanford, but truly most people in my program and in my undergrad were all in the finance world doing banking and consulting. And so I didn't have a big startup and tech network. I knew maybe a few people who'd started companies. And so the very first thing that I did, which I recommend everybody do actually, is I go through my it was Facebook back in the day, but I went through my Facebook and I said, even people, let me make a list of every single person I know who has started a company or who has been part of an early stage team. And that's the first list I made. Then I went through that list and I said, okay, I need to get these people to be excited about what I do so that they want to intro me to investors that they know. Because that intro is actually really, really important. And I think people forget that, because I get so many requests from people saying, hey, I saw you're connected to so-and-so. Can you intro me to them? I said, there's a huge difference between an intro that comes from me that says, hey, I'm forwarding this message along. Let me know if you want an intro versus, hey, I think that this is really exciting and you should take a look on it and it's moving fast.
So
That
the
is totally
key
different. Yeah.
key point here, because this is so common now. Hey, I see you're connected. Can you intro me? As opposed to doing something that impresses that person, that
Yes.
makes them want to make the intro. It's just so much, it takes longer.
Yes.
It takes more work. It's a lot harder, but way better and
100%.
probably way more effective. But like most things that are good in your life, they're preceded by something that's tough, that's hard. Taking the harder path is usually the right one in it. I think that's brilliant on your part, and that makes a lot of sense, so much more than just trying to cut corners of just get me the intro, get me the intro.
Yes.
I just want to talk to that person.
Oh, exactly. And I think the way I describe it to people is you are creating and discovering who your super fans are.
Yeah.
And by the way, they're not necessarily, and they usually aren't the people who are closest to you. So what happens is you make this list of everybody who's like investor adjacent is what I'd call it. So investors, people who started companies, people who are early stage companies. And so even professors, things like that, anybody who could potentially introduce you to an interesting investor or an angel. You make that list, you reach out to each of them, and remember, you are pitching them. You are in sales mode when you're talking to these people. Aren't going to write you checks, but they need to be your advocate. Then you go and schedule as many meetings as you can where you say, it's a Pitbull saying, which is, ask for money, get advice, ask for advice, get money twice. So it's a bit of like, you're going to these people and you're saying, here's what I'm doing. Can I get your advice? And by the way, like, that's not, facetious. Like, you should actually take their advice. You should listen to everybody's advice. You can learn something from everybody. And so you go to them, you schedule all these calls, and then suddenly when you have a conversation that has a spark, it. And you say, aha, I found a potential super fan, because you want that energy. And by the end of the call, if they're saying, okay, how can I help you? I really believe in this. I want, sometimes they'll be like, I want to invest. Sometimes they'll say, I can introduce you to this person. That's what you're looking for. You're looking for the excitement that's going to lead to something great. And usually, by the way, you might talk to 50 people and find 3 people who are your super fans. And that's fine. I made a web of how we actually got our deals done in the early days. And it ended up being 2 to 3 people who connected me to everybody. They were not close friends. They were loose connections who ended up being my biggest supporters and biggest help.
Wow. But you got to do it, right? You got to get out there. And like, how many times did you fail? Like, how many times were you rejected? Like, probably countless, right?
So many times. So many, I'm sure we got rejected over 50 to 100 times. Like, I mean,
wow.
Yeah.
Which what I think is cool, because some would say like this valedictorian, super smart, highly educated person, you might say like, are they going to grind? Are they going to fight through the rejection? And that seems to be, and beyond being brilliantly smart, it's being able to fight through the rejection that probably is one of your best skills.
Yeah. And by the way, that is learned. We're not supposed to feel good after rejection. Yeah. And by the way, I still don't feel good after rejection. I think that there was this thing called rejection therapy that I did. Which,
really?
Have you heard of this?
No.
Okay. This is one of my favorite things. I actually had my EAs and chief of staffs do this like throughout. So it's basically, you can Google it, but it's rejection therapy. I forgot exactly who has a YouTube video on this, or I forgot how I even heard about this, but basically you practice rejection. So you basically go and ask for crazy things that you're going to get rejected for. So for example, I would go to Starbucks and say, hey, can I get this for free? And I just ask them that because they're going to look at me crazy and they're going to say no. But you learn a couple things. One you learn is you're going to be standing after you ask for this. You learn to get comfortable asking for things that you think are crazy. And you realize those limitations are only in your mind. And 3, almost every time you'll get something out of it. The amount of times I've gotten a discount. I mean, I don't go anywhere without asking if I can get a neighborhood discount now. And the amount of times it works is incredible.
Wow. This is a good idea for anybody. I mean, definitely, I think of it too. It's a good idea to have your kids do it, because that's one of the things of trying to build up them being people full of grit and resilience. This is hard, especially if you come from a family of means. We're almost trying to manufacture hardship. This is the way to do it. Tara, my first job, and I didn't think of it at the time. I was too stupid. My first job after getting done playing football was a telephonic new business sales rep at a company called LexisNexis. And we had to make 50, 60, 70 dials a day. And there were many, many, many days where you went 0 for 60.
Yeah.
Why are you calling me? Your competitor's better. Like, I mean, you hear everything. Stop it. Get my name off your list. But if every once in a while you make it through, and then you get to a product demo, and then you get to an opportunity creation, and then you get to the point where you're negotiating, and then, oh my God, I sold a deal. And you keep going and you keep going and you keep going. And now, after doing that type of job for years, not that I enjoy rejection, but it's like, next. It's just a part of life. And I think we all probably be better off if we've dealt with some failure and rejection like that.
Exactly. My brother and I grew up in this small town where truly becoming valedictorian wasn't the hardest thing in the world. Yeah. And we went to a public high school. I actually learned a lot about life there in terms of we had corporal punishment, where if you didn't want to get detention, you'd go to the vice principal and he'd take off his belt and give you swats. So it's just,
are you serious?
Yeah, I'm dead serious.
You're still quite young. This was not long ago.
No. This was in like the early 2000s, late
gosh.
2010, okay. Yeah. Which is just so funny to think about. And this was normal, right? It was like all these like crazy things in West Texas was normal. But I think that's all to say, like, you asked about my parents in the beginning. I think one of the things that they did, I didn't even realize, was they never, ever, ever said, hey, we will give you money if you get good grades. What they did say was, you're going to do great. Of course you're going to do great. Why wouldn't you do great? And it was this weird, I would have never called it pressure, but it was just, oh, okay. Like, of course I'm going to get all A's. Why would I not? Like, there's no option to not. And so it was this interesting, mindset where we just expected ourselves to do great. And so I'd say that if you grow up in a place where you're always doing great, you're not really exerting yourself that much, you haven't really struggled. Like, my parents provided for us. We weren't like super wealthy by any means, but I never worried about money. And we always had food. We always had we didn't worry about that stuff. And then you get into a great college and you start studying there and you realize you're smart. And the thing is, you get really soft. If you grow up and everything works out, which I think a lot more people are going through these days, where there's so many more opportunities. So you're not failing as much before you grow up. Before you're 18, your chances to fail are pretty small because the world has kind of made it so that you're succeeding or feeling successful. You don't know what it's like to fail, and you need to develop that. And so I think for us, I very quickly realized I didn't know what it was to fail. And I was almost fearful. I was so fearful of rejection because I was so used to, if I try, I will succeed. So what happens if I try and I don't succeed? That I had to manufacture this rejection stuff. So I spent a lot of time actually doing this rejection therapy, and I did some crazy stuff. Like I'd go, and I think the difference is you have to do it when you're alone. If you do it when you're with other people, it almost seems like a gag, or seems like it takes some of the pressure off. You have to go where you're alone, and you go to any establishment and you just ask for something crazy that's not offensive, but just crazy, right? I think a simple one that people are even afraid to do is, hey, can I use your bathroom? And so many people are afraid of just asking for things like that.
The other part of that you were talking about at the beginning, Tara, is expectations. It seems like your parents expected you to do well. And one of my mentors and people who I look up to a lot was my high school offensive coordinator, a guy named Ron Ullery, who I still talk to regularly. He said, I don't think people have high enough expectations for those that they're leading. And so one of the reasons I was so demanding of you is because I had higher expectations for you than you had for yourself. And to his credit, he got it out of me. He helped me get a college scholarship, helped me play at a level that I did not think I was capable of. And he was very demanding and very tough, and I hated him at times. Now, I love him now, truly love him for the rest of my life for how hard he was on me and for the expectation level he set. And I respond to that. Now, I guess not everybody does, but to me, like, I'm curious now, you're leading 110 people at Rupa. You're trying to do really big things. You have big ambitions and big goals. How do you set high expectations for the people that you're leading?
Yeah. So candidly, I think this is something that I've had to learn. And what's interesting is I was at a dinner a couple months ago with some really powerful women. And they said, we were talking about this because I'm incredibly interested in greatness and how you get greatness out of yourself and everybody around you. And so we were talking about this, and I'd asked them, who was the boss that you respected the most and you enjoyed the most? And every single one of them talked about some hard ass boss that they had who basically they hated, but who drove them to get excellence out of themselves. And it was exhausting and it was demanding. And there were at times it was tearful and just the whole thing. And then I asked them, why aren't you like that with your direct reports? Because we had been talking about how difficult it is to demand this kind of work ethic out of people. And it was this feeling of, well, there's something in the air that I want to be nicer, or I want to be, it's this like nice versus kind thing that we mess up in our heads, where we believe we are nice when we are soft on people and let them do less than what they're capable of, but we're not kind. And it's this like short-term easiness that we allow, but the long term is actually negative. And so I think that the kindest thing that we can do is set super high expectations for people. Now, here's the thing. When startups are cash constrained and you don't have a big brand that you can recruit from, and this is what I've realized, is your threats are empty when you hold people to a high standard. So here's what I mean. If I say, hey, Ryan, this is unacceptable, and is this your best work because we need it to be better here, here, and here? The threat is empty if I don't actually have a mode of replacing you. And so I think this is where a lot of startups get trapped. I think where we have gotten trapped in the past, which is actually what's super important for this is a strong recruiting team.
Yeah.
Because you really need to know that you have other options as a leader. And the person in the seat needs to know that. Because if you feel it's not about you, it's human nature. It'd be me too. Where if I feel like my boss is saying, hey, you're not doing good enough, but I don't think there's any consequences to that. Okay, it doesn't matter. So I think what needs to happen is the direct conversation is realizing it's actually kind to have that, and then actually having an ability to follow up with your word or whatever it is that you're putting out there.
You need to be known as a person who is willing to make the tough decision and make a change, make a people change, which is the worst, but it's necessary.
Horrible. And every single time, I mean, I think it's cliche at this point, but it's always better for both people. If there's a mismatch there, it's the person on the other end is not having fun. They're not happy. It's not good. And so I really believe the kindest thing I can tell somebody is the truth.
Yes. How about on the other side of it? You mentioned recruiting, hiring. So you're hiring, you're promoting people, you're building up a leadership team. You've built a leadership team. For you, Tara, what are some of the must-have qualities in a person to be hired as a leader on your team?
I wouldn't even say leader. I think that this is it for everybody, which is there's 3 core things that I look for. One is raw intelligence. It's not about how much you know up until this point. It's about how quickly you can learn and how you're going to handle new challenges. So raw intelligence and critical thinking and clear communication is like one bucket. The second one is just intensity. I love working with people who are intense. Working at a startup and at our startup is not the right place for everybody in every phase of their life. And I think those are 2 different things. So you can have the same person over different phases of their life where Rupa is a great period for them in one of those phases of life, but it's not in another. And then you can also have people who are just not the right fit. But it's this intensity of, I want to drive and I am super driven and I have this hunger. And when you talk to people, you can sense that. Mm-hmm. And I index on that really highly. I think it's super undervalued. The third thing is having a sense of humor. So every all hands Monday morning is pretty much just like 30 minutes of stand-up comedy and my team not laughing at me. But it's the best thing ever. I think startups are hard. And if you, sorry, building a company is hard. Life is hard. Like all of these things are hard. And if you can't step back and say, this insane thing happened and we're going to laugh about it and then we're going to get to work and do something about it, you're never going to survive. At least with me.
Oh, it's funny now, even though I've read your tweets and I understand the importance of having fun and you've written a lot about having fun, I was not expecting that to be the third one you said. I wasn't sure what you're going to say, given the fact of like having raw intelligence and drive and intensity and getting after them. Like, hey, we're also going to have fun. I like that dynamic though. Now I think about it. What's it like? I could see you being intimidating because of some of your raw intelligence and drive and humor. What's it like interviewing with you for a job at your company as a leader or just to work there?
I think it's all of these things. I think this really comes through. I think those three things come through where people know that I'm super intense. I'm going to catch their thinking if they're wrong. And also I'm going to make every day. And fun is such a weird thing because I think people kind of tie fun into the nice thing as well.
Yes.
But when I say fun, there is something here that is energizing and we can like, how do I put this? It's this concept of we take our work very seriously, but we don't take ourselves seriously. It's that.
Yeah. And also
come across.
Building together, doing hard things together, accomplishing things together. It's fun, especially when you're making jokes along the way, when you're taking the work very serious, but you don't think so highly of yourself that you can't laugh at yourself, you can't make fun of yourself, you can't make fun of you or others on the team. I think that's really critical too. If you have people like, oh no, we can't make fun of Tara because she's the boss.
Oh my gosh,
if that was the case, then that's not fun.
No. They roast me all the time.
Really?
So we just had our annual offsite. We're a mostly remote company, remote first company, and we do one annual offsite a year all together. And it's truly like the most fun week ever. And this time, actually, we were all on the last day seeing the Aurora Borealis, like in Oregon. It was insane. It was such an insane experience. But we did this crazy scavenger hunt where we rented out this ranch and everybody was in golf carts, like running to different places and videoing themselves doing ridiculous things. And I actually didn't put this together, so I didn't know what was on it. But one of the things they had to video was a mock imitation of me leading all hands.
Oh, geez.
And then they did a video compilation for it at dinner. And I just got roasted throughout the entire.
What did they do? Like, what did they say? What was it?
I guess I get made fun of so much because I like the music to be really loud in the beginning of all hands. And so they all did. It's actually 4 out of 6 of the teams, I think, or maybe it was more, but pretty much everybody did this whole bit where it was, hey, can you hear me? How's the music? Too loud? All right, cool. Let's keep going. Anyway. And then just my mannerisms and all of the things. This is also unique maybe, but pretty much all of my employees follow me on Instagram, and my Instagram is private. It's just for my like close friends. And that's really like, I love telling stories and I love finding the fun and joy in every situation. And so pretty much all my employees know all of the ridiculous things that are happening and like how I see the world. And I do a lot of just funny things that happen. You know, like the other day, I came back to our apartment where, by the way, my brother, my husband, and I all live together. And we all have companies, so it's a whole family affair. But I came back and it looked like a murder scene in our kitchen where there was like spilled cereal, like oatmeal everywhere. There was a broken glass. There was all this stuff, and then there was like pizza on the floor. And I just made a murder mystery like walkthrough on my Instagram. And I think there's a level of our team knows me, and I don't really try to hide who I am because, again, going back to the beginning, a company culture can't be anything other than the personality of the founder.
Right. Speaking of offsites, I'm fascinated by them. I host an event every year. I just got done with it, in fact. So I'm 24/7, though, always thinking of how can I make it better? How can I make it better? What are the keys to a great offsite?
Tailoring it for the team. One of our values at Rupa is design thinking. So actually, you asked about values. Let me share these really quickly because I think they map to everything we do. Okay. The first one is business owner. So it's just the feeling every single person is an owner in the business and no job is below them. It's that kind of business owner mentality. Like everybody knows who our customers are. They talk to our customers. The second one is kid at heart. So that's the fun, right? It's both having the curiosity and wonder and not being judgmental about the world, like being open to new ideas, and also just taking things, a little bit silly. The third one is this concept of design thinking, which is basically how do you craft whatever it is that you're doing for the end user, whether it's a sales email, like how do you really get in the mindset of the person you're crafting it for? But it's also, if we're going to build an interview process, how do we actually not just, here's the process that everybody does, here's how we do it. How do we craft it for the ideal person that we are trying to hire? That's how we do everything. And so that'll get me into the offsite planning. The fourth one is peak performance. We have so many ex-professional athletes and things like that, just that intensity and wanting to be the absolute best they can. And then the last one is human. So just like having humanity in everything that we do, and really just showing up to sales calls I used to just show up to sales calls with our customers, our doctors, on the Peloton and just in sweaty workout clothes, because it was just me. And I wasn't trying to be professional or anything. I was just trying to meet them where they are and just showing up as I am. And that really worked. So when you talk about offsites, I think the number one most important thing is crafting it for the people. It's the design thinking of it, of what am I trying to get out of this? And so people do offsites for all kinds of reasons. For us, it is a combination of re-energizing. I want people to leave feeling rejuvenated to go kick ass. That is the feeling that I want. And a sense of connection too, where they now know these names on Slack and they know each other as human beings. And so this one, we actually built around a lot of what I learned at Lululemon. I built a peak performance workbook where we had 3 days of goal setting, and we had different teammates lead everybody through goal setting. And the stories that came out of it were so touching. I think if you go on LinkedIn, you can see a lot of people actually posted about their experience there. Completely, we didn't ask anybody to post about their experience. They just went on LinkedIn and posted about their experience at the offsite. So I think when it comes to maybe stepping back, what makes a great experience for people, it's in the small touches. So I'm a big believer. If you look at all of the luxury brands, they add these little small touches and gifts and things. And if you try to make it standardized, you lose the magic moments. So I'll give you an example of a few magic moments that we did. And I think it's super important to add these in. One magic moment. So we have a Slack channel called Team Love, where we basically give shout outs to people when they do great things. So what I'd wanted is, we got these little picture frames, and our team picked a team love, like our offsite team picked a team love for every single person at the company. So everybody had at least one, and we printed them out and put them in the frames. And on the last night, we put them in their rooms while they were at dinner. So they came back from dinner and they saw this little frame with something that they had really accomplished and someone shouting them out. And people were crying because of this. Like, it was so emotional for them. So it's just this like little moment. It was like, it's $5, right? It's like nothing per person. Another example of like a little moment was the arrival. I'll give an example. So people can come and they sign in and they get their room keys and things like that. But you have an opportunity to create a magic moment around that. And for us, so we got a roll, again, we're like pretty cheap on this stuff. So we got a roll of butcher paper, and then we wrote "Welcome Rupa Stars" on it. And for every group that came in, we held the leadership team went there early to prep for all of this, but we held the butcher paper and we had the people come run through the butcher paper and like break it open. And it was just like silly and fun. And I think that matters a lot. And then the last thing I'll say is, the biggest thing when people come together is that they can feel lonely, and they can feel like an outsider, and they can feel like they, especially the introverted people, they feel isolated. And so I try to eliminate every moment where they might be standing on their own. So every dinner has name cards, and you have assigned seating at dinners. Everybody has a button with their name tag on it. Like, it has their name on it, so they wear it so people know their name. Everything we do. So at dinner, there's questions that people go through. There's on the little place cards. We program it because otherwise people are going to feel uncomfortable.
Wow. It just shows how much you care, though. That's an amazing amount of time, I would gather, of you, the CEO, saying all of these little touches, these magical moments, they really matter, and we need to show up for our people. I think that's what you get from an offsite like that. That's different from the typical, okay, you're going to your national sales meeting or going to an offsite where it's just kind of by the book. I feel like that all those things really show how much you care.
Totally. I grew up in this town where people hated their jobs, and everybody loved happy hour and going to the bar. And I just thought it was insane that society could tell me that 5 p.m. was happy and 9 a.m. was not happy. Like, why is culture telling me, in society telling me when I can be happy and when I can't? And so from a very young age, I was like, I want to create an environment that I want to work in. And because we spend the best hours of the best days of the best years of our life at work. And like, why not make that enjoyable? And so for me, I wanted I wanted to create something where people would say, I look forward to Mondays. And I have so many screenshots of this, but the amount of people, I remember the first time somebody at Rupa messaged in a group Slack channel saying, wow, that was the most fun meeting I've ever been to. And like, to quote somebody else, like, the weekdays are more fun than the weekends. And now we have a lot of people saying that, but it was just this moment of, that is a huge reason of why I'm doing this. And by the way, I think you can create magical moments in every moment. It doesn't have to be these big offsites. Like,
Yeah.
I'll put confetti in slides for one-on-ones just because why not?
That's so good. Tara, one more question before we run. And I think there's so much more to get to that we might have to get around to at some point, because I really enjoy just the way that you think. Let's say somebody's a bit earlier in their career and they don't fully know what they want to do, but they do want to leave a positive dent in the world. They want to do good. They want to serve, right? What are some general pieces of life/career advice you'd give to that person?
So much. I'm like, so much. But I think the biggest one is follow great people. Don't overthink it. Listen to your gut. Go where you believe the smartest, most energetic, most driven people are, and just go. And it's not going to look sexy. It might look like a retail job somewhere, but just go there. And just keep following great people. Because I think the thing that most people miss is, it's really easy to look at LinkedIn's and resumes and historically see someone successful from their past experiences. It's a lot harder to identify potentially great humans who are just early in their life and their career and their slope. And that's why I say, ignore resumes and focus entirely on the feeling you get when you're around people. Who energizes you? Go there.
Follow greatness, be around greatness. It's all about the who. Right.
It's all about the who.
It's all about the who when it comes to this. I
mean,
it's also how you're spending your life, right? That's how you're spending your life. And the relationships are everything. And so let's work to build relationships with people who sustain excellence with greatness. I think that makes so much sense.
And then maybe like 2 other things. One, if you want to be extraordinary, you can't fit in. And I think that is just like, it's been really calming for me. If you want to be extraordinary, you can't be ordinary, which means you can't fit in, which means you're going to be doing things that are different from everybody else. And just have confidence and have faith in that. The other thing I'd say is give way more than anybody else around you. And take that in every sense of the word. When it's, giving your time, giving your gifts, giving your energy, just give way more, especially early in your career, because that stuff compounds. And you will be paid back in spades over time. And every little thing is worth it. Every little thing. And maybe one last story to close us out on that. When I was in grad school, I had applied. There was this woman and her husband who I really looked up to. And they were kind of like Silicon Valley power couple, and it was just like, I admired them from afar. And she'd started this company. And I really wanted to experience what it was like working for them. And I ended up anyway, this is right before the Lululemon thing, but to get that job, I didn't apply. It was a writer job for her company and a content writer. I didn't just submit an application. I made a 50-slide PowerPoint deck on exactly why I was going to be great for the job and why I believed that could add more value. And it got me a part-time writing job, right? It's not sexy at all. I ended up turning it down to go to Lululemon. But that relationship, that little, that effort that I had, this is now somebody who I'm very close friends with. That couple ended up being an investor. I go to their house, I hang out with them. I mean, this is a decade plus later, and all these teeny tiny threads. And now I'm part of this insane women's community because of her. And there's just so much good that came from that. But I did an outsized piece of effort to get like a seemingly menial job that I didn't even take. And it's paid off in spades.
Wow. Don't just do what's necessary. Think, how can I do more? How can I add surplus value? How can I go above and beyond what's even the already high expectations of a woman like this, it sounds like what can I do more? You never know. You
Yeah, never know.
never you never know what could happen because of that effort. That's an amazing story. What a great way to end. Tara, this is so amazing. As I told you, I sent you my notes and we only got to like maybe a third of them at most or less. So I would love at some point to do a round two with you because this has just been a joy to hear your stories and to learn about your career, and you're just at the beginning. It's amazing to see what you've already done.
Oh, thank you so much. Honestly, I haven't spent a ton of time doing things like this because I've just been building. But
Yeah.
I'm realizing there is so much learning here that if I could do it over, if I could learn these things that I know now 10 years ago, it's just so powerful. And so as much as I can share, that's why I tweet, that's why I write. It's just because it's enjoyable for me. And if it helps someone else, that's awesome.
And I have to believe the more you go on podcasts, and certainly just your Twitter feed alone is very entertaining, very educational. They work, I'm sure it already does. It works as tools to attract high caliber people to you and your company.
Yeah. And not even just high caliber. I think it's, again, it's this matching thing. People
Yeah.
see my Twitter, they see, and it started for recruiting. And
Yeah.
my head growth basically was like, if you don't do this, I will. It's like, no, 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 please. Like, I write all my own, I'm not going to have somebody impersonate me. And it shows who I am. And I think that is honestly a time saver. And
Yeah.
it's just, you either like it or you don't. And by the
Yeah.
way, that's how we recruited our head of engineering who had job offers from 20 plus other companies. He had OpenAI and Stripe, all these things. And I think that this is a huge reason why he ended up, everybody was shocked that he came to Rupa, and he came to Rupa.
That's awesome. Well, Tar, thanks again. I would love to continue our dialogue as we both progress.
Just the beginning.